Okay, tomorrow you're going to be forming your parties based on your assigned agendas as well as your own unique response to individual and collective incentives. Once formed, your parties will be deciding on policy issues such as taxation and public ownership. So I want to make sure you understand those concepts connected to taxation and public ownership. So, first of all, what's the basic economic logic of taxes? Just in case you're unaware, what do you have when you have no government? You have anarchy. And if you enjoy anarchy, there are plenty of places you can go to enjoy your dream state. The nearest war zone. It's the best place on earth, so you can see what anarchy looks like in day-to-day life. Whereas most of us don't really enjoy living in such conditions, and so we form governments. Now, in terms of businesses and governments, what do they need in order to function? Well, they need money. How do businesses acquire the money they need to function? Investor capital, profits. How do governments acquire the money they need to function? Taxes. And so this is just a necessary part of our process that we choose to have in order not to have anarchy, not to live like bandits in the streets. Without taxes, what would happen to your government? And this is what you would want to put in the space number one. One thing, it would go broke and then become powerless to solve problems such as crime. No one to come to your house if you're being broken into or assaulted. That's the sort of thing that happens when governments go bankrupt. That's what you can put in for your answer for number one. What are the two categories of taxes that affect your family most? Property tax and income tax. As you very well know, the second one, I'm sure, if you've had a job of any kind. And they subtract things from it, including income tax. Which tax is paid as a percentage? Property tax or income tax? Hopefully you know the answer to that question. That would be income tax. Income tax is a percentage amount of profits each individual earned. Civic Mirror, the only type of income tax available is a single rate income tax. Whether rich or poor, all pay the same percentage of their income. So we're going to discuss that a little bit. Argument that a single rate income tax is fair. Here's the argument. Each citizen is charged the same percentage of their income, and this is what you would put in the blank on your worksheet. This is the argument for single rate income, that it's fair. Thus, each citizen is charged an equal rate. Thus, each citizen is charged fairly. That's the argument. Everyone has the same rate. Everyone's charged fairly. The argument against single rate income tax as being fair. Citizen 0, annual income is $0. They don't have to pay any income tax. Citizen 1, annual income is $3,000. They must pay $300 in income tax. It is Citizen 2, annual income is $5,000. Must pay $500 income tax. Thus, each citizen is charged unequally. Thus, each citizen is charged unfairly. So this is the opposite argument. Look, I'm paying more than this person, so that's unfair to me. Single rate income tax. Again, you guys are going to be setting income tax in your country, so you need to understand the ins and outs of income tax to make proper decisions for what's best for your country. Okay, next. Which of these citizens are likely to be more in favor of income tax? See if you can't figure that out. We will discuss that further in class. Property tax. In the game, as in Placer County, the property tax is a set amount paid one time each year. As in real life, civic mirror governments often differentiate property tax based on the value of the property. So an EI hex value is greater than the wilderness value, and therefore people tend to set the property tax for the EI hex as a higher rate than wilderness hexes, because they give less or give more income. So, argument that property tax is fair. Each citizen who owns property is charged a set amount based on the value of the property. For example, 3 citizens own homes of equal value. Thus, each citizen is charged the same amount of property and tax. For example, let's say they are charged $100 each year for their property. That seems fair. Everybody's charged equally. Every citizen is charged fairly. Okay, so that's what you put in your... Everybody's charged $100. That makes it fair. However, the argument against property tax being a fair way of taxing people, again, each citizen who owns property is charged a set amount. For example, 3 citizens own homes of equal value, just like we said before, and each one is charged the same amount, $100, and that's what you would want to put in your worksheet. However, each citizen income is different. So someone who makes $100 income, if the property tax is set at $100, that's 100% of the income they make. All of a sudden, they have no money to take care of their families because they're having to pay this property tax of $100. Whereas somebody who makes $1,000 a year, well, that's only 10% of their income. And again, this is what you put in your worksheet. If somebody makes $3,500 in Civic Mirror, that $100 is only 3% of income, or his income. Thus, each citizen is charged unequally, really, in terms of how it impacts their life. Thus, each citizen is charged unfairly. That's the argument against property taxes, that sometimes that lump amount, though it may be equal with everybody else, is much, much more burdensome on some than on others. So then, once again, we'll discuss that one in class. Property tax options in Civic Mirror. When elected into government, you may choose to levy property taxes in a way that is sensitive to the needs of citizens who do not own profitable property. For example, you could levy a little to no property tax on citizens who own wilderness, river, or house hexes, a little bit more for people who own things that generate some income but a limited amount, arts and entertainment, technology, even more for citizens who own property that generate more income, like farms, apartments, health, education, and then the highest amount for those whose property generate the highest amount of income, for example, the EI hex. This is one way you could approach the issue of property tax, but each country will make their decisions based on who gets elected into office and their hidden agendas and preferences. Okay, so this is what you would answer for number 6 on your worksheet. This is the kind of information you would want. You wouldn't have to put word for word, but get the big idea there. Okay, on the next page of your worksheet, on the back page, I want you to simply brainstorm using your imagination. What is the potential danger of people running the police as a for-profit kind of organization, or the military as a for-profit organization? And you can think in terms of Civic Mirror, if that's all you can imagine, or you can think in terms of the real world. If you can't really figure it out for the real world, hopefully you can figure something out in terms of Civic Mirror. Put your answers in the chart according to your brainstorming. So you probably want to pause this video for just a second to get that done. Okay, so I'm going to finish up the notes, assuming that you have stopped to brainstorm on some of those ideas of public ownership versus private ownership. Okay, so we need to know these terms, privatization and nationalization, in order to do the activities and be prepared for what you're going to do in terms of building your party. So let's move forward. You've already done that, hopefully. Brainstorm, fill in the table in your handout. Now here's a chart that shows some of the pros and cons of privatization versus nationalization. Keep in mind that we need to know what privatization is. Privatization is, if you look on this chart, it's simply defined here. It's a firm owned by private sector, or buying a firm to be owned by the private sector. So that's what you write for privatization. A firm owned by private sector, private citizens, not the government, the opposite of the government. And then for nationalization, on that top row here, firm owned and managed by government. That's what you put in your notes for nationalization. This is a firm, or the process of the government taking over a firm that is owned and managed by the government. Now, if you take a look here, you can see some of the pros and cons of privatization. Generally, the issue is in the private sector, when profit is the motive, generally that means that that businesses are going to have an incentive to get rid of parts that aren't working or parts that aren't being efficient. And so then you end up with a machine or a business that's working very carefully to keep expenses low so that they can maximize their profits. That's wonderful for a business. But for things that really we need for the public, that doesn't work so well. So, for example, when it comes to power, electricity, if the business world owns things like power and does everything based on profit, then we can end up with problems like PG&E. We have PG&E cutting corners, and it puts people in danger. We have, whole cities that have been burned down because PG&E is not taking care of certain things they need to take care of in order to cut costs. And so there are dangerous things that come out of that, and such as pollution. If you watch Aaron Brockovich, you can see how pollution killed a lot of people. We've seen recently with the fires how a lot of people died because of negligence on the part of PG&E, that they're trying to make a profit, and it's cost all of us in many times lives. And so that's a problem that we have with the private realm, is that they're not so careful about those externalities, such as pollution and danger to the public. Whereas if the government runs it, they're not so interested in being efficient, and not so good at being efficient, that the private realm is, but they're much more careful about maximizing those social benefits that you get from owning the business, such as making energy affordable, making sure that things are run in a more safe manner for the public, and profit not being the only consideration for how they run things. So those are the benefits, and if you want to see how that would look in your notes. When a good or service is nationalized, the government tends to set more accessible prices, maximize positive externalities, and minimize negative externalities. They're more careful about how things are affecting the community, because, of course, the community puts people in office, and the community will take them out of office if they're not careful about those things. Whereas if a good or service is privatized, firm tends to better incentivize their workers, better incentivize innovation, new ideas, and run more efficiently. And those are the benefits of that. And that's all we have for today. Tomorrow you will be forming your parties and coming up with a party platform.